Welcome back. This is part 2 in our Beginning in Inventor video series. We were working on this Dovetail Slide previously, where we, in video 1, talked about setting up and opening a file, saving it, finding a reference document, which looks something like this, and working on sketching and constraining our sketches. In this video, we're going to add some third dimension and work on some of the additional details. So off we go. So hopefully you were successful in video 1 where we have a sketch. If it's not fully constrained, you can still follow along. At this point in time, if we look at our sketch, for example, we do have some chamfers here on our object. This is something that we could put in on the sketch, or we could add those chamfers later in the 3D object. Right now, let's worry about getting into 3D, and while we're here, let's look. The thickness or depth of this object is 2.31 inches. So let's try to keep that in the back of our minds. Here is our object, and in this case, we want to pretend like we're back in grade school playing with silly putty, and we want to extrude some clay. Up in the top left-hand corner, we have the extrude option under the 3D model tab, and I'm going to select that extrude. And in this instance, because I only have one closed object, and when I mean closed, every corner of our sketch is perfectly closed. You can run into problems if they are not. You'll see I have an interface window here where I can control a number of different things. In this case, we're looking on a default direction of extrusion. That is going to bring this up into the positive Z. Okay, if we go back to our initial front view, remember X is horizontal, Y is vertical, X is coming straight out at us. And that's all happening from this bottom left corner. So go back into a kind of three-dimensional view. We know that our distance, and you can input it here or in the window, 2.31. 2.31, you'll see that object got very thick. And I'm going to hit OK. And now we have a three-dimensional object. We also, over in our model browser, we now have something that says extrusion 1, and it now has a plus sign. If I expand that plus sign, you'll see dovetail base sketch. That's what I named that sketching file earlier. And now we have extrusion 1. So I'm going to rename that extrusion as well. Slow left clicks, and I'm going to call it Dovetail Extrusion 1. Okay, so we have a three-dimensional object. Let's save. Get in the habit of saving regularly. Inventor does not save to the cloud. Okay, it has to go to the file location you specify. So the next step is we have to decide what we're going to do with the details here. I think we got to do some math. So we have to take 2.31, that's our overall thickness, and we don't know what the entire width of this object is. This kind of notch out where the hole is at. So let me pull up a calculator. Calculator. And we're going to do 2.31 minus 0.62. The 0.62 is the thickness here. That will tell me how much material I have left in the top or in this object that I have to remove. So that is 1.69. Okay, I'm going to write that down on my sketch notebook over here just to remember. Okay, and we also know that the height of that, let's see, it looks like 2.25 minus 1. So that is 1.25, and that would be the height from here to the top of the object. Okay, so minimize that calculator. I need to decide how to create a shape to remove material from this extruded object. And my brain is saying if I take and sketch on this highlighted surface and I create a shape to remove material, and we make the shape the size of the area we're looking to remove, we will get the correct information. So here's how Inventor is kind of nice. I can sketch right on this surface that I just created. In fact, I'm going to get rid of this XY plane, or at least its visibility. Hopefully remember that from the first video. And I'm going to sketch on this surface. So I'm going to go up here to start a sketch. I'm going to select this front surface. And now I am sketching on that surface. I have geometry here that is being shared with me, and I want to utilize that. And I'm going to start with a rectangle this time. I'm going to come up to this top left-hand corner, left click to place that rectangle, and I'm going to drag it out. And in this case, I know that the highlighted dimension there at the bottom in the middle, it's supposed to be the entire width of this object. So I'm going to make sure I go all the way over to the other side. I'm going to left click. And what I have now, I move back into 3D, so I have to see this dark black block, so this dark black line. That is the rectangle that I just drew. Notice that this line right here is not constrained yet. It is purple. So let's go in and let's constrain that with that dimension that we pulled from earlier. That was going to be 1.25. And now that I put that dimension, that sketch is fully constrained. Let's go back and remind you where I got that. Okay, our overall height was 2.25. The height of the base over here is 1. 2.25 minus 1 is 1.25. That's how I determine the height of that area. That's all I want to do right now. So I'm going to finish that sketch. And now we're going to go and we're going to go, you're going to say, where's the cut, Mr. Krause? Well, under the extrude function, we could either bring this out of the object, we could bring it in. And you'll see here we've got join, cut, intersect, new solid. We're going to do a cut, and the distance of that cut is not going to be 2.31 inches. This is the one we pulled out our calculator for, 1.69. Okay, you see it's already showing us a preview of what it's going to do. That looks correct to me, so I'm going to say okay. Pretty cool, I hope you think. Okay, now all I have left to do is the hole in the bottom and the chamfered edges. So let's work on the chamfers, okay? We have a chamfer function up here under Modify, okay? Chamfer, and I'm gonna select chamfer. And we're gonna get this interface. Now, again, there's some learning here. So let's get this in an orientation that looks kind of familiar. So we're seeing some options here. We see two distances. We're seeing a distance and an angle. We're seeing another two distances. I'm going to do distance here, or two distances. Well, let's see. Let's look on our sheet. We have 0.75 and 45. So we need a distance and an angle. So that was what we have here. So let's go here. Distance is going to be 0.75. The angle is going to be 45 degrees. And it now wants me to select some stuff. So I'm going to select one face and an edge, and there is a chamfer. Okay, and part of learning how to do stuff is how to modify, or how does a function work. Okay, and right there we've got two chamfered edges, and I'm going to say okay. Notice in our model tab, we now have a second extrusion. So maybe I would rename that to cut extrusion 1. I know I misspelled that. And maybe this is the, let's do a rename. Maybe this is top chamfer. Okay. And let's do a save. Boom. Again, there are many different ways to model here. This is just trying to show you some tools and get you exposed, because it's a very steep learning curve. There's a lot of things in here. Think of all these menus. How many of these menus have we touched? Not too much. Last but not least, we have a hole to put in the middle, and then we're going to be done with the modeling. So it looks to me like we have a center location. We know how far over and how far from the edge of our object to find the center of the circle. We also have its diameter. So how are we going to put this in here? Well, you see there's a hole feature. Problem is when I go to a hole, I don't have a point of reference. Now I might be able to go down to this surface here, and goodness gracious, it's already putting a hole in there. Let's do this. Let's make that hole 1 inch. So it's the right size, except I just ended things. And we'll notice here in the model browser on the left, we have under hole 1, I expand it and there's a sketch. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to edit that sketch. Okay, so now I'm in the sketch geometry for this object. And what if I dimension the center of that hole? Let's try that. Let's go from center to here. And that was supposed to be, let's go check, 0.87. 0.87. And the distance from the corner to here was supposed to be 2.25. And we hit enter. And now we have constrained the center hole of that location. Let's see what happens here. When I finish that sketch, look at that. It moved the hole for me, and our object is done. So I'm going to hit save. In the next video, we'll talk about how to set this up on a piece of paper in an IDW and how to get it ready to be shared either electronically or on a piece of paper.